Reef DVM's coming at you today with kind of the DIY heated floor barn installation that we just completed. Here is kind of the look of the place. Now we already got the well in at the farm, and we tied a line on a previous video from the barn to that well which feeds the farmhouse. Now at this point we've gotten the skid steer out here and we've leveled everything to make it flow to the drains. And now we're dropping down 4mm poly in sheets with a 3-foot overlap so that we can have that as our vapor barrier. So basically we put down a sand bed and we sloped it all for our drains, and then we're dropping 4mm poly, and then we're taking vapor barrier tape. It's red because that's code up here. It has nothing to do with code on the floor. It's got to do with when it's on your walls, but we use the same tape because it really sticks to this stuff good. And we're sealing up all the seams so that we'll have a nice moisture barrier between the sand and the foam and the floor. You can certainly do this vapor barrier on top of your foam too, but because of how easy it is to lay on the sand, we decided to do it on the sand and then put the foam over top. That's just preference. I've talked to people. Some people do it both ways. You also could have just taped the foam, but to me that seemed difficult. We got ourselves Formula 2-inch 250. It has an R10. Really strong stuff. You can walk on it, which is really nice. And we're going to lay down about, I don't know, 100 sheets of this stuff. And again, we're not going to tape this because we taped the vapor barrier underneath. We did have to cut around all the drains and stuff for the floor and stuff in the barn. But as you can see, it laid down really, really nicely. And we did put a 1-inch formula up on the walls to keep the concrete from contacting the building. Then basically it was a family effort. Everybody came out, and my kids, my wife and I, and a family friend, and we basically took black tubing that's made for putting under floors, and we laid it down. Each zone has the same amount of length in 8 of the zones, and then 2 of them are a little shorter, so they'll be on a different valve. But we laid them out and figured out our zones in the barn, and we stapled it to the foam. Pretty handy tool that you can either rent from your local hardware store or rental center. Of course, you got to buy the staples. They're just a plastic staple with spikes that hold it down onto the 2-inch foam board. But as you can see, it goes really well. And I tried to place it about 16 inches apart for the most part. Try not to bend it too hard. It's a barn, so it didn't end up quite perfect. Don't get me wrong. Some are probably as close as a foot, and some are more like 18 inches. But for the most part, we fit the tubing in. We got all our zones in. We have all the tubing the same length, with the exception of the 2 out of the 10. So basically we're going to have a valve that's going to do 8 and a valve that's going to do 2. And then we'll hook it to the boiler, and we'll have nice heat in this barn. Plus, it'll be nice for the concrete to stay warm and so forth. When we came to our center location, we decided we were going to use PVC. They do make manufactured devices and little snap-on clamps that you can hook your tubing into. I had a lot of extra PVC from building the barn and the plumbing and so forth, so we decided we were going to use it. We just basically clamped it to a couple 2x4s to put it in the right position. We used some red and blue tape to kind of indicate the in and out flow, or what we'll call the hot and the cold sides of the flow, just so that we know which way we're going. We also took one of these tubes, placed it, and ran a thermometer in the floor, so that we'll have that, which is kind of nice. Basically there we just took a PVC tube, ran some black pipe the distance, capped the end, and then that way we can thread down at the thermometer probe. Then it was time to pour the concrete. So at this point we've leveled the sand to the drains, we've put our vapor barrier down, we've taped it, we've laid our 2-inch formula, and now we've got our tubing with all our staples in place, and we're basically ready to pour. So brought some guys in. I wanted this floor strong because of farm equipment and horses that'll have to be on it. So we asked them to do a full rebar on it. So we got rebar going in every 3 feet, both directions, and then of course we're tying it together. We're also making sure that the whole entire floor is going to be grounded. So we have 2 grounding rods on each side of the floor driven in, and of course we're grounding the well to it too. Then it was basically wait for the trucks to start to arrive, and the concrete trucks started coming in, and we chose obviously not to drive into the barn too far because we didn't want to wreck the tubing. We used plywood to run the wheelbarrows on it so we wouldn't damage anything, and we dropped about 4.5 to 5 inches. A couple spots it's closer to 6, but for the most part we're about 4.5, 5 inches of concrete floor. Should be a real nice sturdy floor for us. We didn't put aprons on. Certainly we can do that in the future. When I've tied aprons into the main floor, it seems like they heave and they break themselves from the main floor. So I just did to the exterior door, and then if I want to put an apron on later, I can. We poured it in 2 stages. It seemed easier that way. It just seemed like that was the best way of doing it because of time constraints. So day 1, we poured the back half, and then you'll see in a bit on day 2, we'll pour the front half. It all went very smooth. Once we got done pouring it, we basically leveled it, kind of floated it, made sure that our drains had the proper slope to them, and then again we floated over it one more time as that day kind of went on. As you can see, the whole family comes out to watch. It's kind of a fun event. You know, a project like this in Minnesota, give or take, with the insulation, which is kind of pricey, the tubing and the staples aren't too bad, concrete's kind of pricey. A floor like this around here probably cost about, $8,000 to get poured like this. And that doesn't count, the boiler and some of the auxiliary stuff that you're going to need, after the fact to make it function, like the antifreeze, the boiler, some switches and so forth, and of course electric. Each half took about a day to pour, so I'd say about 8 hours start to finish on the pouring. If you're interested also in seeing how the barn was raised, I've attached the link in the upper left corner, and you can see the time lapse on how the barn was built. This is a Morton barn. As you can see, the first half here is done. It looks really good. We're going to cut some stress line cracks in it tomorrow while we pour the other side, but it looks fantastic, folks. And then here we are starting to pour the opposite side. That blue spot there is a floor drain. We've got it taped so that we don't make a mess out of it. And you can see there the well, the water line is there with the hydrant on it. That's looking great. We just showed a video on that in the previous video. I'll also try to attach the link here so you can click on that if you want to see it. But it looks fantastic. So we're floating this one out too. You can see all the heated floor tubing there and how it all worked as everything came up. Now granted, we'll remove the 2x4 and we'll clean that all up as we finish the process of installing the boiler and stuff in the future workshop and tack room that's coming up. And we'll show a video of that when we get there. But overall, the whole process went very smooth. Another 8 hours to get it poured and floated, smoothed out, and of course get the proper grade. And then as you can see on the opposite side, you can see the stress cracks have been cut in, which is great. We cut them in only about an inch, but that should be plenty to get it to crack where we want. Don't want to cut too low, so obviously you run into tubing at some point. We chose not to use the plastic strips just because they never seem to crack where you want, and I just don't think it looks as nice. We didn't have any leaks in the system. I know some people have asked about that. We did clamp off before we started the pour all 10 zones, and we pressurized the system up to 80 psi with an air compressor and then just capped it. So that way we knew if when pouring the concrete, if we did by chance punch a hole in one of the lines or something cracked or broke, that 80 psi would have made a mess of the concrete, blowing some air and bubbles up in it, and we would have been able to see that, which is good. So it was pressurized the whole entire time of the pour, and no leaks, which is fantastic. Here we are floating it out again, getting it kind of sanded smooth on the surface. just turned out really nice, folks. So now the next phase of this is putting up the walls for the tack, workroom and shop, and then we'll move to a water station for horses where we can bathe them and tack them up, and then of course then there'll also be stalls. So it's kind of a work in process, this barn. It's going to be a series of videos. This is where we're going to end this video looking at it right now. This is the floor after it's been poured, and again there's no apron on the front, but it looks nice. We'll eventually cut down the plastic on the back walls and cut all that foam down. That foam was put up just to protect the building from the flooring and obviously keep the heat in the concrete. The other thing with it is it keeps any splatter from splattering up. You can see here we brought in some tools. We're ready to start the work on the tack room. That will be our next video, folks. It should be out here relatively soon, in a week or so. I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe to our channel, and we'll keep putting out videos like this, and you can certainly watch the progress on this barn and also on the reef stuff that we do too. Thank you for watching.